Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those within the community, as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Welcome to Insights. I'm Sherry Stewart. Today we are focusing on Michigan small businesses and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. A survey conducted by the Small Business Association of Michigan found that 1 in 7 small businesses say they are not confident that they will survive following this pandemic. Joining me to talk about the survey and what is being done to help our small business community is Rob Fowler, CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan. Well, Rob, I want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you for spending time with us to talk about this important survey of the small businesses. Let's just jump right in. I know the survey was recently conducted in April. How many businesses did you talk to gather this data?
Well, Sherry, thank you for having me. This was a survey of small businesses throughout the state of Michigan. 1,300 responded, which is actually a very high response rate. We do surveys on a regular basis. This is one of the highest response rates we've had, and I think it suggested they really wanted to be heard at this moment in time.
Mm-hmm. Now, was this an online survey, email survey? How did you actually gather the data?
Yeah, so we have 28,000 members throughout the entire state, and we emailed it to our entire membership, and we've had a very good engagement with a daily sort of briefing that we're doing, encouraged participation through that. It was done online, but really a good participation rate.
Oh, very good for you, and I guess for us too, of course. Now, some of the results, let's just jump into the results and go line by line. It says that nearly 45% of those small businesses that responded, that they are actually closed. So how damaging is that finding?
Yeah, I mean, these are companies that would not have been considered to be critical infrastructure under the current executive order, stay home, stay safe. In that original order, you had to determine whether or not you were considered to be critical infrastructure. The obvious ones were, healthcare and food, grocery stores, and some of those sort of things. But it was actually a kind of a gray area for a number of businesses. So many of them had to go to the list from the Department of Homeland Security to determine whether their company would qualify. Many of them still found themselves to be in the gray area and had to make a little bit of a judgment call about whether they could stay open or they couldn't. One of the things we found is 44% thought they didn't qualify, but 45% were closed. So some actually chose to be closed even though they theoretically would have qualified as critical infrastructure.
That is certainly interesting. In your mind, sir, what do you think will be the learning just from that fact that some didn't really know if they were going to be considered essential? Do you think that we'll have some greater clarification on that as we maneuver waters going forward?
Well, I do think we're seeing more clarification, but this is brand new territory for all of us, and the original list really came out of the federal government. Department of Homeland Security called the CISA list, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure list. And it has been revised twice since the original order in Michigan. And some states have updated to the newer list and other states have not. Michigan is not. So that just meant more things were included, or at least there was more clarification as the country has moved along through this process. But what's really happening in Michigan is sort of taking it an industry at a time. We're seeing like construction now is something that is able to, landscaping and lawn mowing and some of those sort of things. So we're seeing in Michigan just sort of industry at a time being allowed to get back to it.
Very good. So let's look at some more of the findings of the survey. So it says that more than 50% of small businesses don't have the ability for their employees to work from home, a significant number there.
Right. Yeah, so I think there's a sense that a lot of people can work from home, and They ought to be doing that. In many cases, they are. The typical office sort of scenario, a lot of people are doing that. Our organization, we have 26 employees. Every single one of us are working remotely, and it works for us. But if you're a restaurant, a
Right.
retail store, a light manufacturer, assembly, there are simply some of those things that cannot be done from home. And I think what they told us is about 50% of the companies who responded, small businesses, said that just doesn't work for us.
Mhm.
And so an executive order that says work from home does not work for some companies, and therefore they had to close their business or substantially, lower the number of employees. For example, in some cases you could do mail order if you're a retail store, but you couldn't open your doors to customers.
Right.
So you would see some things could be done sort of from home, and other things simply couldn't be done. So
Mhm.
they were really forced to close their businesses.
Yeah, because of that fact. Now, back to those folks that can work from home, if they're in a business that you can work from home, do you see in the future that maybe businesses are saying that, maybe that was a cost-saving measure for them and they're finding that they actually can get work done from home? So do you see that will impact what we really consider being able to work from home or telecommute?
I think one of the lasting effects of this entire thing will be many more companies who thought that wasn't going to be workable for them have found that there are things that can be done from home, that people are productive, they're engaged. Now we've kind of navigated the technology to make it work. Lots of people now have figured out how to do this, how to talk to one another, how to meet, how to produce, and to do it remotely. I think that will have a lasting effect. And in fact, think about office buildings in the
Mhm.
future. I think we'll see a way different office. I think we'll see a way different workforce. This really has forced a lot of us to figure it out. And the lasting effect of that will be, I think a lot of people will be working remotely when they can.
Absolutely. Well, this is such an interesting conversation. We'll talk more about the survey results when we come back. We'll talk about, we see here that 72% surveyed said that they have applied for the Paycheck Protection Program. So we'll talk about that when we come back after the break.
Insights will return after these messages.
Welcome back to Insights. We're continuing our conversation with Rob Fowler. He is the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan. And before the break, Rob, we were talking about just getting ready to get into that 72% of surveyed businesses have applied for Paycheck Protection Program. But even before we get there, there's a finding that says that 14% of businesses don't believe they will actually survive. So tell us about that, and what are some of the mitigation programs in place to help the small business community actually survive?
Well, Sherry, I think one of the most sobering parts of this entire survey is 14% of the people surveyed, business owners surveyed, are not sure they're going to survive this, that they don't believe their business will survive it. Actually, 2% are pretty sure they're going to be out of business within 6 months was the standard. That is I don't know that we've ever seen anything like that, if that were to come true. And I have to say, small business owners are optimistic overcomers. So for them to be that kind of pessimistic about whether they can even survive this thing, everybody plans, everybody sort of, sees coming what they can see coming, and nobody saw this one coming, and couldn't even imagine that the government would tell you must close your business. And so many of them just didn't have a contingency plan for this. The truth is, the smaller you were, the less likely you thought you were going to be able to survive it. Companies with 1 to 5 employees said 15% of them said they didn't know if they would survive it. 6% of those with 100 or more employees didn't think they would survive it. So I think we will see a ripple that goes through this economy for years, starting now, with a lot of companies simply not surviving this.
You know, that definitely is not good news. That's not what we want to hear. And as you say, entrepreneurs, it's typically in their DNA. They're the risk takers. They typically see the future. But again, this is pretty sobering news. So with the Paycheck Protection Program, which was intended, if we understand it, to help those businesses, is it not enough? Were businesses applying too late? How is that actually changing the narrative that we might see in the future?
So there's an interesting little timing issue going on here. This was out in early April, and the Paycheck Protection Program. Actually, I don't recall exactly when it first, but it was a rumor for a while, and then it became a reality. And then the first round went fast. You know, it was sort of gobbled up really fast, and so a lot of smaller companies were left in the second round. And I think when this survey was out, they were left having been standing in line for the Paycheck Protection Program without having gotten any money. So Paycheck Protection Program, for anybody who might be listening who doesn't know what it is, I have been doing this small business advocacy work for about 30 years, and I don't know that I've ever said these words out loud, but the Congress of the United States threw a lifeline to small businesses. It will matter whether they survive or fail. It is that kind of assistance, and it literally is 2.5 months of average monthly payroll. If you and companies can do that math in their head, that can be a big number for even a smaller company. That can be enough to save your company. And the Paycheck Protection Program is going to end up being about $600 billion. And it's a loan initially, and then it turns to a grant.
Right.
At the time of this survey, 72% had applied. I would guess that number is way higher today. I hope it is way higher.
Okay.
A goal of our organization has been to get more small businesses in Michigan than any other state, as a sort of percentage of our small businesses, to apply and to take advantage of this program. We think it is a lifesaver for a lot of businesses. So I think that number is going to be higher if you did it today. We've seen the numbers from the SBA. 60,000 loans have been made in Michigan. $5.5 billion in Paycheck Protection Program has come back to Michigan. So it's significant. We ranked 9th among the states in the number of loans. So we're doing well as a state. But I really hope that if anybody's listening, you're a business owner, maybe even with a little bit of despair, that you will take a look at this Paycheck Protection Program, because I think it's a lifeline for a lot of companies.
Absolutely. We're hoping that many more would apply. So the Paycheck Protection Program is at the federal level. At the state level, are there any mitigation efforts? Are there any state programs that our small businesses can take advantage of? So I see here that 43% have applied for other loans or advances. So might those other areas, might that include some state programs that maybe we don't really know about?
Yes, the state, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation has stood up a program very quickly, $20 million for companies who are affected by the initial closings. That money is gone. It didn't last very long. I didn't think it would. 20 million, went pretty quickly. But the other one that I think a lot of companies now are paying attention to is called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, also federal.
Okay.
Also through the SBA, the Small Business Administration. This one is directly through the Small Business Administration. It can be up to $2 million.
Okay.
At the moment, the window is closed for those, but there should be some additional dollars available through that EIDL program. And we're encouraging small businesses now, particularly if they've already gotten a PPP, to look at this program, because you can do both at the same time. Some of the early understanding was maybe you couldn't, but you can do both. And so we're encouraging members to pay attention to the EIDL. And then, as you mentioned, some local economic development organizations around the state are looking at some additional resources where you can see some of the electric utilities step into that space and make grants available. So I would look at all the local economic development organizations' resources as well.
Okay, absolutely, Rob. Well, we will take one more break, and when we come back, we'll talk about what some of the businesses that will be reopening, what are they going to have to do to provide safety for their employees, some of the protective gear that they now have to provide. We'll talk about that and how your agency could perhaps direct them in that area.
Insights will return after these messages.
Welcome back to Insights. We are continuing our conversation with Rob Fowler. He is the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan. And Rob, so now we want to move into, as the industries are reopened and we get back to whatever our normal is going to look like. And we know that businesses will now have to adjust what their brick and mortar looks like in terms of providing safety and protective measures for their employees. How will they maneuver that? I do see that is 56% of small businesses don't believe they'll be able to implement some of the required guidelines. Some will need some additional physical space. So what is your recommendation in terms of maneuvering this new workspace as we re-engage or reopen the economy?
Well, I think in so many ways we're waiting for guidance here, but I think we can also read the tea leaves a little bit. We can understand what's happening in some other states. We can see what kind of guidance is coming from the early industries that have been allowed to reopen. So we're anticipating a couple of categories that every business needs to think about how it will impact their specific business. One of them is distancing.
Right.
So the issue of can your employees work 6 feet away from each other with, regularly, and not just occasionally, but can they really be 6 feet away from each other on a regular basis and from your customers? So distancing, queuing when people stand in line for something at your business, can they literally be 6 feet away from each other? So can you operate with distance? So one of the survey items was 35% said they would need additional physical space for their employees to actually work 6 feet apart from each other. And for most of those, additional physical space isn't really an immediate option. So I think there are implications to this distancing requirement, but we certainly think that'll be one of the things. Second one will be personal protective equipment, face coverings, shields, between employees and customers, if that's workable, gloves in some cases, but probably not in most. Things like handling money, handling credit cards, all those sort of things. You have to think about how that's done in a way that protects and makes safe for employees. We think the whole issue of disinfecting spaces where people regularly touch, are in touch with, that could be infected, just have to be regularly wiped down and cleaned down. And again, something people have got to begin to thinking about how that will affect them. So those are some of the things. We actually have a guide called the Small Business Owner's Guide to Getting Back to Work. We've developed it. It's on our website at sbam.org. A whole lot of resources there, but in particular, trying to give some guidance on what we think is going to be required by the government when it comes to getting back to work and reopening our small businesses.
Absolutely, and as you say, that would potentially be a challenge for our smaller businesses. We know that our major retailers, they actually have obviously a lot more space. We do already see the face shields separating the customer and the worker. We see that. We see directional arrows on the floors. We see that before our smaller businesses, say our mom and pop salons or even some of our restaurants. We just don't have the space for that.
Right, and I think as we see more and more of these rules come into play, one of the things I'm concerned about is, are small businesses going to be able to get their hands on personal protective equipment? So if face shields or face guards are required, face coverings, then are they going to be able to get those? Because we anticipate it's going to be the employer's responsibility to provide those to their staff. And we're seeing a real shortage of that. And we're not even talking about hospital grade face coverings. We're talking about, normal, even homemade face coverings, but there is a real shortage of this, at least in the marketplace. I mean, I think we're watching lots of people making them at home, and lots of people are figuring out how to get their hands on some, but in quantities enough that it can be done at a business, and the business can have a regular supply. I'm concerned about that. We've tried to work hard on understanding the supply chain of those sorts of things: gloves, masks, face coverings, hand sanitizer, disinfectant. All of that are really going to be, if that's going to be the employer's responsibility, and we assume it is, then getting supply of it will be a challenge, I think, for a lot of small businesses.
Yeah, and I like that you say that we really have to look at the supply chain for that, because this will not be a one and done. This will be an ongoing requirement for our small businesses.
I think we don't know for how long, and that really is going to be the question. So all of us imagine that at some point we'll drop all of those things, that you won't have to work with a face covering on, that when you interact with a customer, that it won't be both of you wearing face coverings, that at some point that will go away. But when is really an important question. We're not going to know the answer to that for quite a while. If we knew the answer, we'd know how deep the supply chain needed to be, though.
We know that this is all new terrain for everyone, but any key significant learnings that we can take from this as we move forward?
Well, I think particularly for those who are considered themselves to be sort of in the economic development business, I don't know that we've ever seen the kind of challenge we're about to face in just helping companies survive and navigate this crisis. What we don't know is how quickly customers will feel comfortable coming back. We've watched what's happened in China and some other places. Saying you can open your business is one thing, but having customers feeling comfortable enough to get back out and spend money and be the customers they were before all of this is another. So I think for the economic development business going forward, a real focus on small business is going to be necessary. There's always opportunity and change. So we're finding some companies that are actually thriving during this, partly because they've pivoted to understanding what kind of opportunity there is, partly because they happen to be if you're a toilet paper factory, you're probably doing pretty well right now. So some have certainly found that there's opportunity, and others have made opportunity. I trust entrepreneurs, and I think we will see lots of companies figure out how to develop some new ways of coping and some new products and services as a result of this. I'm fairly certain that small businesses in the long run will survive this very well. But I do think in the shorter term, this survey and others we've seen we're probably in for some rough waters here in the next few months.
Well, thank you for your transparency in that, Rob. Thank you for spending your time with us today to break down all these important bullets in this survey. So we really appreciate you sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience with us today.
Thanks, Sherry. Appreciate it.
That wraps up this week's Insights. If you have a question, comment, or story idea for us, email news@wbkb11.com. I'm Sherry Stewart. Thank you again for watching.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.